Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the conference. Wow, it feels like we've come quite a long way. This is the eighth, hard to imagine, but the eighth and final day of the conference that began now um, just over a month ago on March 18th. And it's really great to see so many now familiar names coming in here from the waiting room into our participant list, and some familiar faces as well who have joined us for many of the prior sessions. And also good to see some new names as well. If this is one of your first times joining us, you'll definitely want to visit the conference website to learn more and view some of the recorded presentations. We'll be posting that in the chat. But for today, in the spirit of this final day of the conference, and also, of course, Earth Day coming up on Thursday, we are very much looking forward to the future in a number of ways. We have two 90-minute sessions. Our first session starts now, and then we'll have a 15-minute break. And our second session will begin at 3:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, like I said, we're focused in different ways on how to start to take some of what we've learned and apply it to our own local contexts. And that includes what might come next for sustaining the network we create here, but also includes our local work, in our own communities where we are. We're tuning in here from all around the United States and even outside of the United States. In that spirit, the second session is going to be an interactive discussion about what we've learned and where we might go. But right now, I'm really thrilled that Abra Dresdale is joining us on the topic of designing local food systems in prisons or jails. Abra is a founder and director of Regenerate Change, faculty at UMass Amherst, and has been working with the Franklin County Jail for some time now. And Abra has really, led the way in work on the topic of this conference in the Northeast, both in her own local context and then also, of course, to found and develop a collaborative of Northeast prison garden educators. And I've known Abra for several years now, and her work really, and my kind of experience, really truly is visionary in helping to meet people where they are, to imagine futures, different futures as individuals, communities, organizations, which makes this, I'm so thrilled that this came together on our final day. So thank you and welcome, Abra, and I'll turn it over to you. I do want to announce, though, very briefly, before I forget, that we are being recorded here, so just a heads up. But no, without anything further, I'll turn it over to you, Abra. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Matt. And my goodness, it's so sweet to be in the same room. I think I know probably half of the folks here, and Leah and others I haven't seen in so long, and folks we just have been on our Mighty Network call a few weeks ago, Elizabeth and Lila and Sabine. So thanks so much for joining. Really excited to be here, and big thanks to Anna and everyone at Yale and Boston College for all of the labor that's gone into this, and Matt's tireless dedication to moving this humongous movement in the Northeast and nationally forward, the intersection of jails, food, justice, ecological infrastructure. So thanks to everyone who's gone, put their labor of love into this. So I'm going to share my screen with you and do a proper introduction. Okay, great. So yeah, as Matt mentioned, I'm the co-founder and director of Regenerate Change. We're a national organization. I'll share more in a moment, but first want to do an acknowledgement. I'm calling in from occupied Mohawk and Lenape territories. This is not a place that I'm indigenous to. My great-great-grandparents came to this continent seeking basically freedom from persecution. And at the same time, my people have deeply benefited from the resources and occupation of this land and the white privilege that has been compounded with that occupation. So I just wanted to invite us all into a moment of acknowledging the often erased histories and names of people and rivers where we're calling from. And if you want to just take a moment and put your attention on that. And if you do happen to know the territory, you can write it in the chat box now. And thank you for joining me in that practice. Native-land.ca, if you want to drop that in the chat, maybe Matt. It's a great resource if you're curious to learn more and don't know. So again, my name is Abra Dresdale. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. The current place that is known as the Mid-Hudson Valley, or the Mahikanatuk River, the river that flows both ways, is where I'm calling in from. And a little bit about Regenerate Change, and this will kind of frame the journey we'll be on for the next hour and a half, and it will be mostly slides, but we're going to have an opportunity for 2 breakout rooms to really reflect and integrate what we're hearing, so it's not going to just talk the whole time. So some of the frameworks that syncretically inform this presentation and the work that we do at Regenerate Change include regenerative design, whole systems thinking, solidarity and justice work, social permaculture, and mindfulness and self-care. And we, as I mentioned, are a national organization, and we do 3 things. We do education, culture shift consulting for institutions, which you'll see a bit about today, and lastly, network weaving. And we have a couple of guiding principles that help really set the frame. One is right relationship, acknowledging that almost all of us in this country were born into an overculture of fragmentation through globalization and westernization, and reconnecting to ourselves, to our ancestry, to the natural world, to each other across difference is a radical act of being in right relationship. Leading from lineage, really strongly sharing who we are and our identities and leading from that place. Practicing solidarity, knowing that each of our own liberation is intimately linked with each other's, and we cannot have one group progress without all of us dismantling oppression and moving forward shoulder by shoulder. Embracing edge. We look a lot to the natural world in Regenerate Change, and we know that ecotones are edges in landscapes where different ecosystems come together. And we know that those are the most fertile of places, and socially, that's an incredible place to create change on the margins. And lastly is change making across scales, knowing that we cannot just solely focus on trying to create systemic change if we're not walking that talk personally. And it's not enough to just do our inner work, right? There's so much tending and mending that is needed to be done in the world. So we really work across scales. So we're going to have an opportunity to hear from each of you in a pair share in a breakout room in a moment, and to get your own orientation to this work in the space. So let's see, I'm going to drop in our chat box here. Where did our chat box go? Okay, so this chat box will follow you, the prompt, into the breakout room. We'll have 5 minutes total. So 2.5 minutes each. If you could keep time, I can set a reminder about halfway, but just to share time equally. And if you want to identify yourself, your preferred pronouns, where you're calling in from, and what brought you to this session? What is your relationship to the correctional system? And with a request that whatever is shared in the breakout room stays in the breakout room. So all your responses are by choice, but we're asking please to keep whatever you share with each other confidential. So we will see you all back here in 5 minutes, and you should get an invite to click on a breakout room now. Thank you.
I don't quite see the breakout room yet. Is anyone else seeing them?
Nothing's come through.
No.
Oh, you're on mute, Anna. I think Anna's working on the breakout rooms.
Oh, Anna, we can't hear you again. Sorry. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. You and Abra don't have to enter the rooms.
Okay.
Just, it looks it invited you, but you shouldn't need to.
Okay.
Sorry.
And should we, well, looks like people are
There are a
joining.
couple of people who aren't. Yeah, so I'm moving people into rooms that have
Oh,
other
great.
people in
Okay.
them.
Right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for participating in a brief meet and greet. I hope you found some meaningful connection. So back to nature, really the essential teacher of so much work around healing and regeneration. This is a core framework that we work with, comes from the natural world. And they're called nested holes. Some people might know them as fractals, which are analogous, a little bit different though. And so if we see nested holes like the rings of a tree, we can actually see that not just in nature, but in human nature and human ecosystems, social patterns repeat throughout every level of society unless it's interrupted and designed otherwise. And so this points to change made at the center can actually become impactful across scales, and really want to center each of you as powerful thought leaders, change makers today. You know, even if you're nascent in your journey of change making or prison justice work, we are so significant and have the ability to ripple out and influence all of the rings that surround us. So nested social ecosystems, going from the rings of a tree to thinking about that center ring, that heartwood, which is a botanical term. We have the individual, which is you at the center. And each of us are involved in so many different projects that we create or we have some influence over. And collectively, many, many projects constitute groups such as institutions, organizations, etc. And in this talk, we're focusing on jails and prisons. And collectively, institutions and organizations make up the universal contexts and larger worldviews that collectively assemble a society and a culture. So I always love to just remind us that we are significant, that we literally at the center, you know, we could wake up some mornings and feel discouraged or overwhelmed when we turn on the news and hear about mass incarceration and climate change and, you know, immigration challenges and building of walls, right? But honestly, we have the ability to ripple out and exert influence on all those projects that we're a part of and all of those institutions or organizations that we might be a member of. And ultimately, when we design our projects, our social interventions in an intentional way, they have an ability to ripple out and collectively influence these larger worldviews and universal contexts that might have had us sunk. So this is one of our theories of change. So the invitation, and Matt, you really set me up well for this one. We didn't even talk about it, but the invitation for today is to become a futurist, co-designing the outcomes of food justice and the prison system. So let's dive in a little bit here. One of the ways that I really believe we can shape our future is with the tools of regenerative design. And some of the threads that we've been weaving together are also coming in for an exciting new regenerative climate justice curriculum and toolkit that we'll talk about later. And one of my co-authors, Lila Glenn Rimolowski, is on today, and she'll get to chime in a bit too. And so much of the curriculum and toolkit for this new course and for the local food program, the Franklin County Jail, really comes out of the work of designing with communities and training and consulting with them and with students, and now weaving it all together. Looks like there is a funny image that has been drawn on my slide. I don't think I did that. Hang on one second. Let me just see if I can. That is very strange. Has never happened before. Does anyone know about, is there like a Google Classroom or something that, not Google Classroom, but there's this, does anyone see that yellow circle come up? Matt, did you notice that?
I was going to say I see it, but I have no idea. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have any.
Oh, that's very strange. I didn't do it because I'm hitting Control Z. Oh, it's like on the, it's somehow on the desktop. Well, I'm so sorry, y'all. I wish I could have the technical skill to know how to do this, because when I move my computer.
Abra, it's not really distracting from your slides at all.
Okay, thanks, Lila. Let's see, I'm gonna just try one more screen share option here. Thanks for bearing with me for this technical glitch. Let's see if we do it this way. Okay. Oh, it's still there. All right. Oh, now it's going away. Well, whatever magical person just made that go away, I appreciate it. All right, we're just going to catch up on our slides here. Oh, I see we're at the end of the slideshow. Okay. Sorry about this. This has never happened before. So we are here. Okay. So as I was saying, one way to shape our future is with the tools of regenerative design. So we work with institutions and students and weave together all sorts of designing in a laboratory setting and seeing what kind of change can come about. And so the regenerative design process, which is the diagram you see on the left here, is one of our frames for our talk today. So we'll be moving you through designing a local food program at each of these stages in the design process. So first, I just want to uplift an incredible training that we were able to offer right before the pandemic hit in February of last year. And we worked with prison justice activists who are not necessarily affiliated with a correctional facility. And we had a 2-day training. It was so wonderful. And people came up with all these incredible different modalities for healing using social and ecological infrastructure. And that was followed later in the spring by a virtual similar training, regenerative design, for jail educators on the inside, folks who work at an education department in Franklin County Jail, Massachusetts, and really thinking about the project ecosystems, the stakeholders, the champions, the gatekeepers, and how can we continue to refine and design the programmatic offerings in food justice. So kind of taking all of that curriculum together and the learnings we've done in the last 7 years or so at this program, walking participants and you all through this design process. So we always start with context. Context is what makes a regular design process of just sort of replicate, repeat, best practices, formulaic solutions, change from that mentality to a regenerative and context sensitive mentality that is really looking at the nuances, the unique individuals, institutions, opportunities, and constraints. So we always start with context. And for this talk, I'm going to frame a little bit about these two concentric rings, the jails and prisons context and the wider context of food and climate justice, knowing that we cannot talk about food without talking about climate and vice versa. So context, looking at the big picture, that widest ring out, mass incarceration in the US. And probably many of you know this, that the US has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population, approximately 2.3 million people. And today there's more people behind bars for a drug offense than the number of people who were in prison or jail for any crime in 1980. And we know this is part of the cascade of Nixon's war on drugs beginning in 71 that was disproportionately and strategically targeting Black and other Americans of color. So you can see this chart, 1 in 5 people incarcerated are locked up for drug offenses. And if we look at racial disparities in the carceral state, this infographic is for citizens who were born in 2001, and it projects their life trajectories. So you can see pretty clearly the patterns, but some of them, if we pull out, 1 in 3 Black men and 1 in 6 Latinx men will be incarcerated. That's compared to only 1 in 17 men. Similarly, 1 in 18 Black women, 1 in 45 Latinx will serve time, but only 1 out of 111 white women. And I really want to emphasize that this is not because people of color, BIPOC folks, disproportionately break the law. This is completely due to structural racism and policing, sentencing policies, implicit racial bias, and forms of economic oppression that all contribute to these racial disparities that we see at every level of the criminal justice system. And today, people of color, BIPOC folks, make up about 45% of the US population, give or take how you're measuring, and 67% of the US prison population. So really wanting to hold the thread of structural racism along with climate change and injustice as we're talking about the food system. So it's not that hard to make a leap looking at the context of mass incarceration today in the US as a legacy of neo-slavery in a new evolved form of a legal food system. So this is a short conceptual timeline. So the legal enslavement of West Africans during the founding of this nation and several other nations through colonial rule then morphed into what were called Black codes and vagrancy laws after, quote, emancipation. And with these laws in place, things like unemployment, loitering, people without a permanent home or residence were grounds to arrest. And so this was a very specific structural way to target and incarcerate Black folks, which then continued to supply cheap and free labor after the, quote, abolishment of slavery, which was resulting in the continuation of Black Americans as property and labor force for the food system and other forms of industry upon which this nation has accumulated its wealth. And then today, we see this morphed into the mass incarceration crisis that we're looking at that has really snowballed under the guise of war on drugs, as we talked about, was specifically designed targeting BIPOC residents in this country. And then we're going to add another layer on. Everyone take a deep breath. I know this is not new, but it's always a lot to hear. It's always a lot for me when I prepare this stuff. It's just so horrid. So we're going to layer on and bravely look at climate change and mass incarceration combined. So there's really endless examples here, but one that is particularly visually compelling. I pulled up the NRDC extreme heat and vulnerability map. And these are heat waves in the country and high deaths which, you know, you can see predominantly in the southern portion and the western portion of the country. And then if we layer that with the number of US contract prisons, so these are corporate private prisons, we see that a vast majority of them are also coupled in the same places of extreme heat vulnerability. And we know that climate change and the coronavirus have been intimately linked as well with changing conditions on the planet. There's not as much of a system of checks and balances. And so things like epic outbreaks in San Quentin and Rikers Island, et cetera, like we can't say there's a causation, but it seems likely that there is a correlation of climate change and most vulnerable communities being incarcerated and dying in jails and prisons, while simultaneously being targeted with viruses and other forms of biological vectors. So this quote really stood out to me by David Favi, the director of American Civil Liberties Union, National Prison Project. And he said that heat stress in prisons is becoming a bigger issue as the prison population ages and has more people with chronic and medical conditions, more people on medications that make them heat sensitive, and the weather is changing and we have hotter summers. So that's just one example here. And we can think about folks who are on the front lines as well, who are not inside, but perhaps are either on a work release program or are post-release and being reintroduced into the community. And often it's their labor and their bodies that is on the front lines, either being grossly undercompensated or not even paid to fight things like the fires in the West. And I think very recently California changed this, but up until recently, they couldn't even use that job training to go after jobs in this field post-release. So again, I just want to invite us all to take a deep breath as we put our attention on these incredibly intersectional, intense issues that face our people. And so that was the big picture context, that larger ring, right? Looking at the food system, climate change, structural racism. And now we're gonna zoom in one layer to the institutional level, to the jails, and thinking about the context of the case study that I'll share with you all today. And my hope is that this case study will be instrumental in helping you think about not so much you know, doing exactly what we've done, but sort of like, what are the principles and process that actually successfully instituted change within a correctional facility? And how can you apply that thinking to facilities you might be involved with, to wider networks connected to prison food justice, to nonprofits you might be engaged with? So I want you to be thinking actively about, how do I apply these principles and process to whatever ring of change-making projects that I am engaged in? So I want you to be actively listening through that lens. And if this particular case study like really lines up with a jail you're working with, and that's also wonderful too. So the context in Franklin County, Massachusetts, that's occupied Pocomatuck and Abenaki or Abenaki territory, depending on how you say it. It is now a co-ed facility. It used to be 100% people who are assigned male. It's still predominantly that way. There's 250 residents there. 215 of them are in medium security. And medium security, 27 are in minimum. And then there's a re-entry house in the front with 12 beds. The site sits on 37 acres of primarily unforested land, and it's a mix of steep slopes. There's some mown lawn, and what is most interesting is that this used to be a working jail farm as little as 25 years ago. So there's a strong precedent here. And it's also in a deeply agrarian region of Massachusetts. That is, Franklin County is also the most economically depressed county in the Commonwealth. and has a history of being a rust belt and is reviving itself through the local food economy and in partnership with the institutions of higher education that dot the valley. So here we are back at the regenerative design process. We've looked at context, and now we'll be looking at goals for this program at the institution level, and a little bit of how it's going to ripple out and affect food and then eventually climate change. And these goals were amassed from a multi-stage community stakeholder planning process. So these were not just goals that I generated or my clients at the jail, the administrators in the education department and programming generated. This really came from different focus groups of working with stakeholders in the outside community, working with administration inside, but also, and most importantly, working with incarcerated students and getting their input and perspective through focus groups and letters and surveys. And so together, I wove these goals, hearing an echo of different voices. And so it's just really important to stress that. I'm sure many folks know we don't want to be saviors kind of coming in and having the right answer for the disenfranchised and just recapitulating a problematic charity and missionary paradigm in the well-intentioned justice work that we are engaged in. So the goals are increase nutrition and access to fresh local produce, expand therapeutic opportunities with horticulture, offer vocational skill training and academic preparation, create a supportive network of mentors, practitioners, and resources that may reduce recidivism rates, knowing that those pro-social connections when people get out are what actually help them stay out and get their lives in a place where they are in charge of them. And lastly, provide employment opportunities in the regional food economy. And one thing I forgot to mention, the context and why the #1 goal is increased nutrition is people who are incarcerated at Franklin County Jail tend to gain on average 40 to 80 pounds during their sentence. And these are short sentences. And we know a lot of that is lack of exercise, and also people are on medications or detoxing, but we know predominantly it's the carb heavy diets, it's the canteen, it's not having access to whole foods. So moving on to analysis and assessment. I'm just going to show one slide to just give one sense, but this was a very robust, again, multi-year process. We began in 2013 with a pilot grant, a federal Perkins grant to create the first garden. And from there, we went through a robust analysis and assessment program or process to see in what ways can we very thoughtfully and context sensitively expand our offerings. So in addition to doing that on the ground research in the community and in the institution, we also looked to case studies from around the country. I saw someone from Insight Garden Program is here. I had the wonderful opportunity to be a guest at the Green Life program 2 times at San Quentin Prison, and also interview Pandora Thomas, who's another social permaculturalist, about the Pathways to Resilience program and Insight Garden program, and just so many incredible things happening at San Quentin. And we really deeply looked at case studies like San Quentin and Rikers and others, and asking how can we design change from within the system, where incarcerated residents actually transform into climate activists, and then they are making recommendations to the very facilities that imprison them, how to take action both within the facility and on wide world climate and food justice initiatives. So it was so inspiring to see that model. And there's a lot there too that we learned, like things we would do differently. And so, of course, case studies are just so important, especially if we can go in person and understand what lessons have been learned and what we can adapt and evolve in our own correctional contexts. So moving into social design. And we're going to be looking now, zooming in specifically on the project, which is now called the Jail to Farm to College and Employment Program, and how that fits within jails and how that fits in the much larger context of food and climate justice. So there's a bit of a mouthful, but the design solution in theory is the development of an integrated pathway. And to date, we have done all of the following since 2014-15, when the project really got implemented: linking incarcerated men and now women and non-binary folks with therapeutic skills building and employment opportunities, and doing that through gardening, on-site, farming post-release, food preparation in the kitchen and in the library with food preservation courses, cooking and nutrition courses, cooperative business development courses. And so many of those were paired with credit-bearing college courses and internships through partnering with the local community college in Greenfield. So just to give you a sense of the morale, the images, the beauty, this is just really an incredible program that has taken so many participants and labors of love and has gained national attention. Even CNN came in to do a film on the opioid crisis and really uplifted. There's so many programs in Franklin County Jail and so many programs in jails broadly, and they really uplifted in their video this local food program. And so also, I just want to say something about myself at the center. Like, I didn't grow up knowing anyone who's incarcerated. I grew up here in the Hudson Valley, Mahicanatuk Valley of what is known now as New York. And I stumbled into I was invited by a colleague at Greenfield Community College into a graduation ceremony at the jail in 2012. And I came in that day and I was so moved by these incredible students that were finishing a sociology 3-credit course. And I cried in front of them. And I said, this is such important work, but who am I? Like, I don't have a relationship to this system. I feel totally naive. And the door opened and I kept making connections and relationships and following my passion. And it was literally 1 year later, we received that federal Perkins grant for the pilot year. So again, that's just an example of like feeling insignificant as I was in the center, and then realizing, oh no, there's something here and I can keep building and keep building. And like what has been born to date through this program and the relationships built has been so powerful. And while we really do focus on gardens and food justice, it's not the project purpose. Right? The purpose is for incarcerated participants who've been suffering at the hands of so many forms of oppression and childhood abuse, like the hardest stories I've bared witness to. So the purpose is for these incredible participants to regain their dignity, their sovereignty, and their agency over their bodies, over their lives, over their food. And so we use gardens as the instrument to do that, and post-release job placement in farms and food businesses. But really, this is about developing change makers who are in charge of their lives and have deep skills to create change. So these folks have been doing all sorts of work after they get out with food justice, ancestral foodways, addressing climate collapse, structural racism in the food system, land rematriation for their native communities. I mean, it's been so powerful. And I have a short video I'll show you in a moment to give you a sense of like the incredible power of these students to learn the design process and literally design change. So for those of you who are visual learners, as I am, the social design came about in this manner. So again, we wanted to create an integrated pathway that linked incarcerated residents with all of these essentially educational opportunities that then potentially also led to returning or going to college and or job placement or entrepreneurship as a cooperative. So there again, there's a bulk of folks reside in medium security A subset are moved to minimum or they are released directly. And from there, a subset of folks go to the reentry house. And in all three of these buildings, we made sure there was therapeutic, gardening, nutrition, and cooking programming, as well as Greenfield Community College accredited farm and food systems courses. And I should mention that in 2011, I was hired by the college to create the farm and food systems program. So I had been there for about 5 years, developed this associate's program, hired faculty, built it out. And so I was kind of the perfect person to migrate that program into the jail. And so I point that out to say that it is actually very helpful to find a liaison who can walk within 2 or more systems to make that bridge, because often if there isn't that trust built or that insider knowledge of the institutional culture, it can be very hard to kind of say, hey, college, I want to bring, your robust offerings in here. Not impossible, and certainly like, the Barred Prison Initiative, there's so many projects, but usually that's someone who can code shift, who's been working for years in between the institutions of higher education as well as the correctional facilities. So just want to name that importance. And then we also made sure there were volunteer opportunities and paid college internships at all of these levels. So at like Stone Soup Cafe, the Just Roots Greenfield Community Farm, et cetera. And then we had post-release pathways. And I shouldn't say had, we have, it's present time. So sustainable farming was one that we had articulated and continued to build relationships with farms in the Valley. Local food processing, we made an incredibly strategic partnership with the Franklin County CDC and Food Processing Center, and they hire folks coming straight out of this program to work in their huge commercial kitchen, creating, iced teas and hot fudges and salsas. And while it's an entry-level job, it does pay above minimum wage, but people are also learning how to be food entrepreneurs and how to cook and how to market and how to brand, how to co-pack as they have these jobs. So it's a really exciting partnership. And then in the kitchen, we've started buying any of the surplus food that the Community Development Center's kitchen freezes, and they're trying to move that product and we buy it at a low price. So there's a really sweet functional interconnection, to use a permaculture principle there. And lastly, we really know that worker-owned co-ops have been an important organizing tool for folks who have criminal records. Usually if you have a record, you're the last to get hired and the first to get fired. And so having job security and democratic control over your workplace is a really radical technology and way to incorporate. So we have really focused on worker-owned co-ops, and simultaneously the compost co-op in Greenfield arose out of educators at the jail hiring formerly incarcerated folks to do that part of waste cycling in the food system. And then through this program, if someone is inside and times it right, you can get up to 9 college credits spread out amongst 5 or 6 courses, several of which are 1 credit. And they're all for free. They're all paid for by the education department. And ideally, if students are interested in getting either a certificate, associates, even a bachelor's, they can apply that to the community college, or we have an articulation agreement with UMass Amherst, where I teach for sustainable food and farming bachelor's. They could even do the whole thing online. So it's very, very exciting. And lastly, and I would say this is certainly a weak link in our program, but the intention is to have support from case managers in that post-release period and paid community mentors, so that folks really are able to get those jobs, get back to college, make those connections. And while we do have post-release case management support, the ratio of case managers to people coming out is just really impossible to keep track of everyone. So that is a place we definitely want to continue evolving our system, our social system. So yeah, the college courses, I want to just zoom in. I mentioned we had about 5 or 6. I want to just zoom in on one of them and give you a little highlight treat. This is a class that I have had the the joy to teach at the jail for 6 years now. In total, I've been teaching it for 11 or 12 years through the community college. And that's the Introduction to Food Systems course. This year, we were able to read Farming While Black by Leah Penniman. And some of the students were so excited about her Haitian recipes that the nutrition class the next quarter actually focused on that. So that was really wonderful. And Leah's a dear friend and colleague of mine. So it was so nice to kind of bring her essence into the room. We also have, hands-on courses that aren't social sciences, like organic gardening and creating farm food co-ops, food storage preservation, and issues in sustainability. So, it's been a really incredible thing to see these students come alive. Some people who have never even gotten their GEDs from high school, who are taking college courses for the first time, and they're just so persevering, right? They can't even fully read the text, but they're journaling and they're drawing and they're raising their hand, and just you can see their confidence building over time. So, wherever possible, adding a college course or accreditation, even if it's through an internship or an independent study, really, in my experience, has boosted the interest in that program and the morale and the retention. So I want to just give you, just a few seconds here. This is by consent. These are 3 students from a food systems class I taught the jail a few years ago. And we teach them this regenerative design process we've been looking at today as a lens for actually creating recommendations to the facility, to the gatekeepers and the administrators at the jail. They undertake a rigorous analysis and assessment process. This team in particular was, looking at calories and menus and canteen choices, looked at case studies and came up with these design recommendations. So I just want to share with you a brief bit from their final presentation.
My name is Gerard. Menacey. I'm Sean. This is our project titled The Ins and Outs of the Inside. It has been brought to our attention that inmates are gaining between 40 and 80 pounds during incarceration at the Franklin County House of Corrections. We believe that this is mostly at fault of the nutrition options available through the FCSO dietary menu, as well as the items available for purchase on Canteen. The meals are laden with carbohydrates, lack significant proteins, are highly processed, and are overall unhealthy. The available options for commissary purchase are overloaded with sodium, sugars, and saturated fats. The amounts of pastries and unhealthy snacks versus meats and seafood items are overwhelmingly biased. Food waste from the kitchen and excess of unfinished trays is being inappropriately disposed of instead of being used effectively. A Massachusetts law passed in 2006 states that all institutions must compost their organic waste by 2020. Recyclable food packaging is being sent to landfills and may be causing negative effects on the environment, such as leaching or the contamination of the water table, which could negatively affect our local food systems.
So I don't know, every time at least I watch, I get chills and such a sense of the power and agency of these incredible change makers that really go through a transformational process in these courses. So I hope that was a nice treat for you all. So we're nearing towards the end here, and then we're going to have some time to do some processing in triads and breakout rooms, and then we'll close with some questions. So implementation, looking at the change-making project scale and jails and prisons, food and climate justice. How do we tie this all together? Here are some of the things that we've figured out, and by no means is it perfect. It's a working draft. But we received a 5% commitment from the Sheriff Donnellan, to procure local foods in the kitchen. And 5% might seem like a small amount, or if you're in the field, it's significant, but it's quite a significant amount. And much like I shared with San Quentin, we said, well, where can we learn from other institutions that are further along on the farm to institution pathway? And so sweet to see Britt here, who's been a big champion. We've been working together on creating a farm to corrections sector for the last several years. So yeah, looking at those institutions' best practices essentially, but then adapting and evolving their strategy and figuring out how to share resources with them. So over the years, we've been in conversations with UMass Dining, who they're really quite a champion in sourcing local food. I mentioned already the Franklin County CDC, and we said, you know, who are the vendors that we're already buying from, who are already state approved, to make it really simple for the kitchen. And Performance Food Groups was already a vendor, and we could buy them from Franklin County CDC, or essentially the products that the CDC were freezing locally were being made available also through Performance Food Groups. So it was just really easy to be like, you know what, we want these particular potatoes or this butternut squash, and preferencing that over, you know, the Cisco squash, for instance. And over the years, working with Farmed Institution New England, as I mentioned, and seeing all the incredible work they have been doing with hospitals and schools, our Franklin County Regional Council of Governments, and all the Mass in Motion and you know, eating healthy and centering local food programming they had done, working closely with Rachel Stoller, who had been a guest in our food systems classes many times. This was definitely the heavier lift in the red, working with the nutritionist and the head cook to redesign the menus, which, you know, if you take pride in your job, you don't really want critique that there's something that can be changed. But slowly and steadily pointing out how carb heavy and laden with syrups and, you know, white sugars all the food was. We were able to slowly redesign the menus. The students in my food systems class were able to advocate for healthier canteen snacks, and, you know, getting more things like fish and nut butters and proteins and herbal teas. And we had spent some time talking with different foundations about supporting this initiative. And one thing I'll also mention that didn't happen this year because it was a distance class, but the year before, the final presentation, one of the student groups recommended a food for families farm in the jail. So right now we have raised beds in 3 of the units, plus a greenhouse, but there's still so much land within the perimeter fence. And they put together this incredible proposal, and we were actually able to have the sheriff come and hear it for the final class. And their recommendation was, let's grow food in the facility, or like in the grounds, to feed our families. So we're learning farming skills, and we're able to still provide for our families while we're incarcerated. And that food, this year, it started last year slowly with the COVID virus slowed things down. But this year, these gardens, this Food for Families farm, is going to be feeding loved ones when they come for visits. And we're also discussing drop-off sites at the different nodes of housing where a lot of people's spouses live. So it's very, very exciting on the ground change. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, as we're thinking about, you know, the wider networks of jails and prisons, of like, how do we create coordinated culture shifts? It's exciting when we have these projects, you know, in our own institutions, but like this conference we're in, like, how do we really share with each other what is happening on the ground, coming out of our silos, and really working towards creating a new normal where food justice and considering climate impacts are part of the narratives and the practices and the priorities of these facilities. And thanks to folks like you, this is really becoming a little bit more slowly the norm, and it's catching on. So I want to end by just sharing the launch of this very exciting new regenerative climate justice toolkit that we're making available through Regenerate Change for sale to facilities all over. And this was in part inspired by a series of climate change and futurism workshops that I organized with my friends Alixa and Naima of Climbing Poetry for the last 3 years before the pandemic. And it was so powerful to have them come in, totally transform the space, bring the Stitched project, invite students to create poetry and raps and stories, and people always cry. We learn about incredible case studies and artists, and people are visioning the new future and the new reality of liberation, right, that they want, and of incarceration and post climate change in a positive way. So we said, wow, like incarcerated students are so excited about these ideas. And if we want to continue farming in a resilient way, we know we need to really address the climate and all of the food insecurity that's happening with the droughts and the floods in our global food system. So again, we kind of wove together the best of what came out of those regenerative design trainings for climate change makers and prison activists, and to make this brand new course. It's a 48-hour course. It's not accredited, but it does conform to ABE, Adult Basic Education Standards, which is what most education departments and jails and prisons are looking for. And the approach, much like regenerative change, it's a whole systems and intersectional approach. It applies a regenerative design process. And Lila will speak to this a little in a moment, but Lila, Glenn Rimolowski, Jordan Williams, and I have put this together, and it really comes through a racial justice and a decolonization lens, particularly looking at ways of knowing and learning about science that aren't monoculture of Western worldviews. How do we learn through citizen science, through indigenous science, through storytelling about our environment, our climate, and solutions? And lastly, really inspired by those climbing poetry ritual workshops, it incorporates art making, ritual, futuristic writing that just really ignites students. So in the process of undertaking this course, we imagine students will gain agency and activation in their own leadership in the climate movement, much like we've seen them take on in the food systems movement. As I mentioned, the curriculum conforms to adult basic education standards, and it's a whole downloadable toolkit. I'll share with you how to access it towards the end here. And graduates, ideally, our hope is that they're going to take action and contribute to climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and reversal efforts. Lila, do you want to come off of mute? And I'm just going to go through these, the main purpose of each unit, if you want to just talk about it, because you did a lot of development in the first few units, and get your voice in the space.
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, so Unit 1 really aimed to share some of the social causes of climate change with the students, understanding the inherent interconnectedness between various social justice movements and systemic oppressions with the most, I'd say, like severe and common ecological impacts of climate change. And like Abra said, the intention was really to move away from this idea that all understandings of climate change and climate justice must come from an empirical, peer-reviewed Western academic institution. And the goal is really to offer embodied opportunities for students to tap into their own knowings or their communal knowings or their ancestral knowings of what climate change is and how it impacts our bodies and communities. Yeah, and so Unit 2 kind of goes deeper into those multidimensional understandings of climate change while also taking the next step towards what Abra mentioned about activating agency in the students by giving folks opportunities to do interviews with peers in their class, to pay a bit more attention to what are the problems, the climate change related problems that they're experiencing within the context of their jail, and begin, planting some seeds for ideas that they might want to integrate into the eventual design process that arises at the end of the whole curriculum. And so Unit 3 goes into this kind of like multi-life sector case study analysis of understanding how different frontlines communities led by people of color, low-income folks, working class folks, formerly incarcerated folks are working towards their own climate justice strategies. And we're really trying to move away from the idea that there are solutions to any of these problems, but rather strategies that can be adapted to specific contexts and communities in different places and time. And What's unique about Unit 3 is that there is a huge focus for multiple lessons on the intersection of climate change and criminal justice reform. And so there are many opportunities for students to be asking direct questions and learning about the unique way that climate change impacts prisons and jails, and also the ways that students can, create changes within their own environment. And lastly, Unit 4 is all about the regenerative design process, which Abra has been walking us through for the past hour or so, where students are able to integrate all that they've explored so far and co-create a strategy in a small group in the location and context where they are. Thanks, Abra. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Lila. So beautifully spoken. I put in the chat, if you're interested in learning more, we have a free sample download of some lesson plans and the table of contents for this 48-hour course. There's 24 lesson plans at 2 hours each, and a whole bunch of incredible resources that our team has compiled. So check it out if you're interested for the free download. You can contact me through that website if you do want to learn more. It's going to be out May 1st. So it's so close to being done. So we're going to have this opportunity now to actually do a little bit of the reflection integration with each other, which is that center circle in the regenerative design process diagram. So again, there is the invitation to be futurists, right? And to create the change we're calling forth. So there's 2 questions, and we're gonna break out into groups of 3 this time. And let's see, I want to make sure I've got these questions here for you. Yep. So I'm also putting them in the chat box. So the first one is, how can we design our programs and our networks like this one to ripple out and influence the larger contexts of racism, climate change, while we're doing our food systems, food justice work, knowing we cannot address just one bubble in the web of challenges without systemically addressing the other ones. And second one is, what do you think is the role of art, futurism, and media making in designing change in response to the climate crisis? So this is a little bit of a shift here to really focusing on the climate crisis. So those are the questions, and it'll be more of a discussion rather than a pair share like the first one. And then we'll come back and have some time to share out and reflect with each other, ask questions of me or Lila, and also let you know how to get involved if you want with this incredible network of regenerative change makers. If you do have to leave early, you can definitely check out our website, which I included in the chat with the info on the toolkit. It's regeneratechange.com. So let's see, Anna, if you're ready, I think we will do, we're going to do 8 minutes total for our breakout rooms, and you should have those prompts with you in the chat. And if you're able to stay for the end, it would be great to have you so we can close out all together and hear from the intelligence of the folks in this space with a little report back. And then we'll open it up to hear if there are any reflections you want to share from the breakout room, and then a round of Q&A. And I think people should be back pretty soon, right? Great, here they come. Welcome back, everyone. I know 8 minutes does go by so fast. So I just want to share a few ways to stay connected to us at Regenerate Change, and then we'll open it up to hear any nuggets from your breakout rooms, and then a little round of Q&A if folks have them. But yeah, so there's different ways to connect with our incredible team at Regenerate Change. There's 5 of us between the Mid-Hudson Valley and Denver, Colorado. I've just put in the chat if you want to check out our mighty network of regenerative change makers. It's a really exciting alternative to social media or Facebook. And we do education prompts twice a week and have incredible networking events and free webinars. And that's also where you can take online courses and workshops with us, or just visit our website. It's in the chat there. You can sign up for our newsletter. I write them, send them out every new moon and full moon, uplifting different frameworks and change makers. And it's just an incredible basket of goodies. And yeah, if you are interested in being inspired and knowing about what's going on, that's a great way to stay connected. Yeah, I already put the Mighty Network in there. If you are on the Instagram, you can follow us, Regenerate Change. And my co-director, Adam Brock, wrote an incredible book called Change Here Now, focused on community solutions. And my book, Regenerative Design for Change Makers, still in beta form, is both are available on our website, the bookshop, and there are free digital downloads there of key chapters if you want to check them out. So let's open it up to the room. So I see there's a request here from Anna to add your info to the spreadsheet if you want to connect with other conference participants as well as presenters. I saw Britt also, if you want to get connected with Britt or learn more about Farm to Institution New England, and especially the farm to corrections sector. Thanks so much for the love, Britt. So if people want to share, what I would like to invite you to do is drop an asterisk in the chat box. And so that'll kind of be a stacking of hands, or stack for raising hands. If you want to share out anything from your breakout room, the second one is not confidential. So if you do want to share any highlights of what you discussed, you can do that now, just to hear like what kind of brilliance was bubbling that you didn't have enough time to finish. So we'll start with that first round, and then we can go to Q&A in our last few minutes here. It's so nice to see all your faces. I'm going to come off of the screen share so we can do a gallery view here. All right, great. Let's see. Anyone want to share out? Feeling brave? Daniela, I choose you.
Brave. I'm feeling empowered by your skillful facilitation. I learned so much. Thank you. In our little breakout room, we had Laila that we heard, Kiana from New York, and April from Pennsylvania. And we sort of identified as one pathway, we identified building coalitions as a strategy to connect to local climate groups, to connect to local urban agriculture movement and food justice movement, and to open up carceral environments, to bring these community partners maybe even into these environments and extend the programming into the communities that might contribute to greening of urban space, and especially in disadvantaged neighborhoods, and enhance, bring more people power and more power to existing networks outside the bars.
Yes, thank you for that generous share, Daniela. Erica, so nice to see your face. Another incredible co-steward of this Northeast Prison Food Justice Network. Any others want to share? All right, so we'll open up second round. It can be a share back from our breakout rooms, or a question or comment about the presentation. I see Wayne nodding your head there. We could do asterisks again if you want to make a comment or a question. And we've got about 5 minutes left. Aleka, so nice to see your face too. Yeah, Erica, please.
I guess my question is about, with all of the different threads of organizing and like social justice change making that the garden can really easily be connected to, have you all used strategies for exposing students to these different ideas within a class that's more focused on the garden itself? Like to kind of to figure out what is resonating with students when there's so many different possible paths of learning. Does that make sense?
I think 75% makes sense. I'll respond. You tell me if there's more. Yeah, so Tony Hall, I know you know them. They're our full-time garden educator. And so they're out with the students, 2-3 times a day. And I know that Tony is using like the way that the crops interrelate, or just some of like the biology lessons of development, the tending, the cultivation, as social metaphors for how do we tend a garden and how do we create interdependency and what happens when there's neglect and like which element is the most vulnerable and how does that relate to different identity groups. So yeah, we hired Tony specifically, I put in a good pull for them because they really bring that social justice lens and are very poetic and constantly using the metaphors out in the gardens themselves. Was there another part to that question? Did I get it?
No, I love that. Yeah, metaphor is our bridge, and then you see what people bring back to it. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ibra.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks, Anthea. I should also mention, kind of unrelated, but related, that Heartwood I talked about, the center, the self. I'm actually teaching a personal regeneration workshop this Sunday from 2 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern online. So if you're interested in regenerating your own self as a change maker or just someone who's overextended after COVID, you can check that out either on our website or on our Mighty Network on our education pages. So that's just something that's coming up and exciting. I will be back online with an incredible group of people. So without further ado, I guess, Matt, do you want to just make one more plug for our Reflection Integration Conference session coming up in 15 minutes?
Yes, so thanks so much for this wonderful, really wonderful presentation and kind of discussion. And someone said, wanted more time in the discussion, and in fact, we'll have quite a bit of discussion time in the next session to really share back and reflect on, this last month, things that we've learned and where we're going from here in our local contexts and together. So we hope you'll stick around in 15 minutes at 3:45 p.m. Eastern time. 15 minutes from now, we'll begin that. So please do take a break, and thanks so much again, Abra, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much again, Matt, for your years and years of organizing to make this happen, and just so wonderful to reconnect with colleagues in this network. I've missed y'all over the last year. I've kind of, maybe like some of us have been in this deep rock of inner underworld journey of transformation, but it's so nice to be connected with you all in the spring and coming out of COVID. So thanks to everyone who came. Feel free to reach out and be in touch if you want, and hope you have a great rest of your conference.
Thanks. Hey, Danny, put you with Erica in a group if we're around this number. That sounds okay.
I would love that.
Okay.
I'm here. That sounds good to me too.
Okay.
Thanks for being our shepherd, Matt.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for.
Thank you.
This is looking forward to the conversation.
Are you gonna miss it next Tuesday? You're gonna miss it.
I know. I think I will. It's been, such a routine here. And I'm so grateful for all of the presenters and attendees who have shared their wisdom, in many cases hard-fought wisdom, about their programs, their work, their research. And of course, special thanks to Colleen Murphy-Dunning and Anna Pickett, who have really sustained the kind of infrastructure, for this event, and helped it to be a container for this to grow. And so I know I've personally learned, so much from all the presenters, and specifically from hearing all the presenters, some of them back to back, and all of us in conversation with each other. And I've also heard from a number of attendees and presenters that, this has been a really, inspiring space full of a lot of learning. And so this workshop now is about what's next as individuals, as organizations, both in our local context and as a group. So this session is going to really invite your participation, everyone who's here, and to reflect on, what are some of the things that have been most important for your learning in this, whether you've been here for just one session or just one day, or if you've been here for every single one, right? Your kind of input, your voice matters is important here, and we really appreciate you for being part of it. And so the goal is really to, in speaking, and I'll introduce some of the co-facilitators of these groups in a moment, but the goal is really to meet some of the other attendees, debrief about the conference, and really think together about what's next for us individually and as a group. So what we'll do, how this will unfold logistically, we're going to go till around 5:15, maybe a little bit later if we have a lot to say, but in a few moments, I'm going to be asking you, we'll be breaking out into small groups for almost an hour. And while these conversations will differ based on who's in the group, we're hoping to explore, all of us facilitators, the same topics. First of all, what have we learned from this conference, and what are we taking back to our local contexts? Secondly, where do we go from here? What are some of the needs for the field overall, and what might a community practice look like? So in some ways, those who are here for Abra's presentation, in some ways we are very much going from the kind of interpersonal to kind of thinking, in terms of the larger systems and communities we're related to, and to each other. And so those are kind of the two main areas of our reflection. And the facilitators will ask for someone to take notes, and then we'll be reporting back and kind of sharing back and opening up the discussion back to the larger group towards the end of the session. So I will then be collecting the notes and organizing them and sending them to all of the participants here. So one brief word too, we will be inviting everyone who's put their name based on suggestions from a number of presenters. We'll be inviting everyone who put their name on the conference networking list to opt into a Google group that will be a space for continuing to share news, announcements, resources. And so if you haven't yet put your name and email, we'll be putting it at some point in the session on the chat, and so you can do that. And so that will be the way we'll share kind of what kind of came of this session and some of the conversation we had. And like I said, I'm really, really so grateful and appreciative of, I've had the chance to work with these co-facilitators and connect with them over the last week or so. And really terrific group that, while many, some did not present, they all definitely could have or deeply invested in this work. And so joining me to help facilitate the small groups are Kelly Bush, who's co-director of Sustainability in Prisons Project, Christine Norton, who's professor of social work at Texas State University, Denny Jock, who's assistant professor of sociology and criminal justice at University of Akron, Erica Rumbly, who's co-founder and director of the New Garden Society, William Jett, who's fleet manager at Grow NYC, and Amanda Berger, who's co-director of the Insight Garden program. So thanks again to all of these folks for helping to guide the conversation in these small groups. So I'm going to be posting the list of questions that we've come up with to begin the conversation in the chat. And the facilitator, we want everyone to have access to be able to see these, but the facilitator of each group is going to be kind of guiding us through these, right? Because you'll see we have a list of like almost 6 questions. We probably won't, depending on the group, we probably won't get through to each of them. but we do want, just for everyone who's attending to be able to see, where we're going, kind of some of the things that were on our mind as we were preparing for this. So I'm sharing these to the chat now. And once again, you don't have to worry too much about reading these in detail. The facilitator will kind of help to guide and move along and facilitate through these. And again, a reminder, please do to have someone in your group volunteer to take notes. And of course, it would be great for whoever's willing to share back towards the end when we rejoin as a small group. As a large group. So I think without any further introduction, let's get right to it. And I'll see some of you now in a small group, and then look forward to seeing all of you in